You know, it's crazy to be here today because I'm so happy that we're still able to have conversations and that we're still able to find really cool things to talk about.
Yeah.
But we always have such a human experience whenever we talk.
Yeah.
And you're about to have the ultimate human
I know.
experience.
I was just gonna say, I'm actually really worried for this interview because we already have such like heavy, emotional, like kind of like philosophical conversations, and I'm like extra like emotional. I'm like, am I gonna cry today? I might.
That's not the intention. But you should feel as comfortable as you can to be as honest as you want to be.
I might cry during this interview. Oh my God.
As always, you know. But I do feel really sort of emotionally thrilled for you because from the first person I spoke who was just figuring it out.
Yeah.
Running around, trying to make noise and seeing how far you could disrupt things and tell the truth.
Totally.
To be so centered in such a beautiful home.
Thank you.
You did it, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
On the 1.0, you did it.
Yeah.
And your 2.0 starts in earnest.
Yeah, totally.
Does it feel like that?
For sure. And also, it's like cool because I got to maintain all those things that I loved about that original journey, you know, because it's like I still get to be disruptive and I still get to be, you know, like expressive in all those ways, but not in a way that's self-sabotaging. Being able to self-advocate and like create kind of like a safe environment and create, I feel like every time I talk to you, I've learned to create more boundaries.
Oh, so I was going to say that.
Do you know what I mean?
100%. Because when I listened to this album, and that's what I was going to ask you, because there's so much self-awareness in this record. The most.
Yeah.
I mean, coming from concept to, you know, the idea of this Romeo and Juliet environment to real truth, this is me, I'm Ashley, I'm manic.
Yeah.
To like, wow, it's almost like this is the most important and final step before you're actually able to share your truth with someone else.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, it's like, it does kind of feel, there's like finality in it in a way, like this isn't true, and this is like kind of antithetical to like the whole point of the album, but I'm gonna say it because it's a real thought, but like the feeling of like I have to get everything off my chest that I won't be able to say once I'm somebody's mom. You know what I mean? So like all those like expressions of like guilt or insecurity about being like I'm unlovable or I'm, you know, these stories of like sexual promiscuity or like, you know, sabotaging relationships and self-destruction. And like it's like almost like I'm like emptying my vault of all these stories before I start over, and it's like, okay, now I have to be responsible.
Go on,
like,
be a big girl.
Else. Yeah.
You asked for this.
You asked for this, totally. That song is such a good
Love that song.
reflection of it. It's so funny too because it's so, not satirical, but like that second verse, that the who the hell is in your bed, you better kiss goodnight and give some head. And then the morning comes instead. Is this the life that lies ahead? You know, and like none of that's a reflection of like actually how I feel. Like my life's awesome. I love my partner. Like our relationship is so full of like love and passion and communication. I remember having that moment when I was probably like 5 or 6 weeks pregnant and being like, so what happens now? Like, do I have to be boring?
Right.
So many of the things that I self-identify with are not compatible with motherhood.
Well, they're rooted in pain.
Yeah. Well, that's when you realize, too, that's when you take a step and you go, oh, I'm holding on to my trauma because it's part of how I define myself, and I'm never really going to grow unless I really let go of that trauma.
Well, there you go. There's a massive realization right there. Talk about doing the work.
Yeah, I at 6 weeks pregnant, I was like, oh my God. I was like, what the heck?
But it brings it to the surface, and you know, I can only speak from becoming a parent point of view. I'll never truly understand the experience of becoming a mother. I can only admire it and as a part of a relationship, right?
But as a parent,
it brought a lot of things to the surface for me, and you know, I totally relate to this album on that level of purging.
Yeah,
there's a purging going on here.
Yeah, totally. You know? It's also like, as all my albums are, it's like kind of predictive of all the possibilities. You know what I mean? Where like on Manic, to have a song like More, you know, which is a song we discussed in our last interview where I'm like singing to the baby I'll have one day.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yep. Completely, by the way, unaware that this is the way my life would develop.
It was an emotional conversation because you were in the process of figuring out what was possible. Even.
Yes, exactly. So not even knowing that this could be a possibility or like a potential path for me, you know, and certainly not thinking it would happen within the next 2 years, you know. To go from that and then, you know, on this record to have a song like Darling, Darling and then Yokbirni, the last song, they kind of cover the bases, cover the possibilities of like, I'm singing to my child, almost getting everything off my chest that I would want them to know. God forbid something happened to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because there's moments in this record when I can't distinguish between the message that you're telling yourself versus the lesson you're teaching your child.
For sure. There's a lot of lyrics that touch on that where I'm maybe singing to a child instead of a lover.
Yeah, someone that's spurned, or to yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
And also, what's super interesting about lyrics like that is that, when you find yourself in a reflective moment like that, don't you just kind of get closer to accepting that this is who you are?
Yeah.
Because I felt like in the first couple of albums, you were searching for what's wrong with me? What's wrong with
Totally.
me? Why am I like this?
Yeah.
And then in Manic, it's like, oh, I've got the answer. I'm bipolar. I'm this.
Yeah.
This is my unique chemistry. I'm putting it out for the world to see.
Yeah.
No jokes. This is who I am.
Yeah.
But is this album to some degree about acceptance as much as it is about realization?
Yeah, it's the easiest album I've ever written. Literally. Everyone was like, why are you writing an album? You're pregnant.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you at the very top of the conversation. But we don't do intros, you and I. So we went off on a tangent and here we are. So let me do the official introduction. Why do we even have an album right now?
Because it was the easiest album I've ever written. And like in true Halsey fashion, the writing of the album always manifests itself in like a complete juxtaposition to how I feel in my real life. Right. Manic, I told you, was this album that I initially intended to be like an angry, political, pissed off, femme pop punk album. And then I ended up with this like eclectic rainbows and butterflies synths and like this gentle, this like I got Dominic Fike doing Beatles background vocals. It was so the opposite.
Yeah, psychedelic.
Yeah, and I was pissed when I made that album, but it manifested itself in a different way. Now here comes me, like totally in love. The world's in shambles, but I'm getting arguably the first break I've had in 7 years. I'm finally taking care of myself, like eating my vegetables and getting sleep. And like, I'm pregnant and everything's amazing. And then out comes this
fury and dark, and I called before, I said it's deep and very aware, but there are times of absolute, just unbridled fury in the sound of this, which I love.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it was, I think part of it too was almost like no matter how old I get, I'm always going to kind of be a brat in the sense that, like, I want to do the opposite of what people are expecting. And, like, I think being pregnant in the public eye is, like, a really difficult thing because, as a performer, so much of your identity is predicated on being sexually desirable,
It's arrested development is what it is. We like you here, stay here.
Totally. Don't change, don't have personal growth, don't whatever, And if you do it in a way where you're sharing it with us so that we can benefit off of it too.
Well, especially if you're a female artist, not to try and put myself into a conversation where I don't have the appropriate knowledge, but damn, I'm a human being and I see it's been tough year after year after decade for a female artist to decide to start a family, and all of a sudden people expect you to hang your microphone on the door as you leave.
Yeah. So this is a really complicated subject and is actually kind of what the record is about and like where that fury comes from, which is like socially we've been reduced to two categories. You are the Madonna or the whore, right? So if you are sexually desirable or like a sexual being, you're unfit for motherhood, right? Like you could never be someone's mom. But as soon as you are like motherly or maternal and like, somebody does want you as the mother of their child or their wife or their whatever, you're unfuckable. There's like, that's your options. It's like those things are not compatible socially, and they haven't been historically for centuries, So there's initially that. And then there's this mentality of like, you don't win. Because if you start a family, like I'm 26 and I I tried very hard for this pregnancy, and it was like, I'm financially independent. I'm pretty far along in my career. It feels like the right time for me to do it. And I got treated like a teen mom a lot of the times, you know what I mean? Where people were like, oh my God, like you're so young and you're like, you have so much to do in your career and you're not married and you're this. And it triggered all of these feelings of like kind of shame from when I was younger.
Yeah.
It like triggered a lot of like old feelings of shame in me where I was like, how can you have that kind of opinion on me making this decision?
Yeah.
Because the flip side of it, right, is that if I don't, and I wait until I'm in my 30s, and I do SNL for the 6th time and have my 7th #1 album and whatever,
And guess what? That treadmill is destructive for relationships.
Totally. I do the same stuff over and over and over again, and I have, the career that people think is, the whole point.
You should be lucky. You should feel grateful. Everybody wants you to keep working.
But then there's also, she worked too hard. She never had a family.
Yeah, what a shame.
She's going to die alone.
What a shame.
She was too obsessed with work. She never found someone. It's a shame. She's not going to have any kids. Her career's not going to hold her at night. Okay, so nothing. So f 'em. And I just was like, I'm going to do what I want to do. You know what I mean? Yes. I was like, this is important to me. Like,
no, you're not just going to do what you want to do. Ash, you're going to make an album that's going to tell the truth about it.
Totally.
Right? There's a lot of really strong men and women who make decisions in their life to recalibrate the construct of what people expect and what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And they take the narrative back.
Yeah.
You've done that.
Thanks.
Now you're telling everybody what the new narrative is.
Oh, yeah.
Based on what it was.
Yeah.
And that's why this record is so powerful. That's why a song like Tradition is an opening salvo. And so
I love that song so much.
Oh, it's incredible. And it really sets up the whole experience. Deep ruminations, not just in all of what you just eloquently and beautifully said, but also the complicated dynamic between X and Y in the evolutionary state of mind.
Yeah. It happened by accident. I think the record became that way because I wasn't trying to do that. I wasn't trying to make like a political record or like make a record that was like, kind of drowning in its own profundity. Like I was just writing about how I feel, and I happened to be experiencing something that is very nuanced and very complicated. So it kind of just like, it manifested itself in the record in that way where, with pregnancy, there's this thing where it's like, this flowers and butterflies, milk bath kind of, I'm a goddess, I've reached my full state of submission. Also my feelings don't matter anymore because I'm doing the most selfless and most amazing thing, which is having a child, And I'm saying all this like facetiously,
You're not wrong.
Because then here comes along, which is actually pregnancy for some women is a dream. And pregnancy for some people is a fucking nightmare. Mm-hmm. It's a nightmare. And that's the thing that nobody else talks about, right? Is the pain, the blood, the disease, the fear, the fact that it's arguably the most dangerous condition a human body can experience and has been for millennia, that like it kills people and to this day still kills people who don't have access to the right health care. It's framed as this time where you should be so grateful. And, me especially, like talking about my loss publicly, which I have, like talking about lost pregnancies and my struggles with reproductive health, and people saying, you should be so grateful. And I knew the whole time I made this album and made the film that people were going to be like, for someone like Halsey who's had miscarriages and whatever, like she shouldn't have been working so hard. Like would it have killed her to just stay home and like relax for the baby? I like knew there was going to be that immediately. And like, again, this is why I'm saying the conversation is so nuanced because, the reason that the album is like sort of this horror theme, you know what I mean, is because this experience in a way has its horrors, and I think everyone who has heard me yearn for motherhood and yearn for this for so long would have expected me to write the album that was full of gratitude. And instead I was like, no, this shit is so scary and so horrifying and my body's changing and I have no control over anything and I do finally have this thing I want, so I wake up in fear every single day that I'm gonna lose it. I have this everyone's like, aren't you like just living a dream? I'm like, no, actually I have nightmares about waking up in a pool of my own blood.
Yeah.
That's actually what it's like. that's happening at night, and then you wake up in the morning and you have to call the CEO of XYZ and say, hey, hi, I'm just calling to let you know I'm pregnant. Yeah, I didn't want you to find out on Instagram. I wanted to tell you myself personally. It's still business as usual over here though, don't worry. Don't worry, my personal choice isn't gonna affect your profitability or your productivity or your assembly line. And also, in what world would you ever have to call me to tell me that you were having a baby?
Yeah.
But I have to call you because it
Yeah.
impacts your product.
Yeah. You are just stacking up one bullshit experience after
Yeah,
another.
it's awful. I mean,
Yeah.
there was publications that were like, we were looking for going out and like trying to set up magazine covers based around the album release. And they were like, yeah, but is she going to be pregnant? Because like we don't want to do a maternity cover. And I was like, it's not a maternity cover. It's about my album. I'm just happened to be pregnant. And they're like, no, it's a pregnant cover. And I was like, so I can't go talk about my album.
In what world is that even a conversation now? It's not 2021 for anyone who's just experienced the last 18 months and has an eye on what we should be doing to build something that actually
That's how
resonates.
the conversations were.
It's crazy. We still got a long way to go.
And also boohoo to me though, you know what I mean? Like whatever, like these are small, but what they are is they're seeds that are indications of like people who aren't as privileged as me or in the positions that I am. Like imagine what they're experiencing if me at my level, I'm
Yeah, but it's a micro of an
that.
overall macro. It's not like that's
Totally.
unique only to entertainers, songwriters, producers, people in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
Like everybody going through this in their own way, whether it's dealing with the job that they have to take maternity leave from
That's what-
and
yeah.
they don't have an understanding situation going on there, or to your point, they don't have the means to be able
Yeah.
to secure the right help. Everyone is experiencing their own journey.
Yeah.
And what I really respect about this album is that you have not just, you haven't made a pregnancy album. This isn't a I'm going to have a baby album.
Yeah.
This is like I said, this is more, a document about the dynamic of being a woman giving birth from your perspective at a time when there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
About actually making that an experience that is as stress-free as humanly possible and basic human rights. And that's one of the things I really love about this record is that you're making these songs at a time when they need to be heard.
Yeah.